Oh, hey, I thought I was the only one that was camping out for episode 2. You were too? All right, well, part 2. Let's get it rolling. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach. Here we talk about overlanding and tech, and this is video 2 of the build series on this high-end platform that I basically designed and built entirely myself from the ground up. So today we're talking about wood, how to cut it, how to measure it, what I recommend is good practice, and what I've found to be basically the best way to go about building this stuff for your platform. So, with that being said, if you like this kind of content or you like what I'm doing with the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell. That way you'll actually know when I post new videos, and YouTube can't hide my content if you're really trying to find it when it's posted. Also, like the video, because if it brought you any sort of value, it lets everyone know that people actually like my content. So thanks for doing those things. They're completely free and they really help out the channel. So let's kind of jump right into it.
Okay, so I'm getting ready to cut my piece of plywood, and basically it's going to be a 40-inch by 41-inch piece of plywood. So I marked 41 inches because we've got a 40-inch width already on this board. It was already pre-cut. So I marked in 3 different spots, and then I used this long ruler to draw my line. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clamp down with these basic C-clamps. We're going to clamp down this ruler so I can use it as a guide, because basically I'm going to have this side of the saw press up against this. So hopefully that'll help me make a straight cut, because basically it'll go like this and slide through. So that's the plan. Now I just got to do it. Okay, so just to give another pro tip, so honestly, and pro tip means I'm a pro, which I'm not a pro, but I think I know a thing or two. Make sure you measure from the inside of the blade to right where you want to keep. So if my blade, if this is everything I'm keeping, measure, including the thickness of the blade, how far away that is, okay? So in my case, it's gonna be like about 1.25 inches, maybe 1.1 inches. And so then from your line, you measure 1.25 inches or 1.1 inches. See that? And then I use a framing square just to square it up. Make sure if there's any play, then your ruler isn't lined up correctly. Okay, so hopefully the light isn't too harsh, but I'm test fitting just the cage right now, and it's like loosely assembled. But basically I cut my board on the bottom a little too short. I cut it 41 inches, and it could hang over just a little bit more, because I opened up my window and I set my cage right where I want it to be, so that I've got just a little bit of space behind that back seat there. You can see that. Okay, so I've removed this wedge that lays in between these middle row and the carpet in the back. So what I've done is, these are the plastic parts that sit inside that carpeted wedge. So what I did is I just took out the bolt that goes through them and threaded it back in here. So we're gonna anchor the front of this carpet with these spots, and then in the rear we're gonna use turnbuckles. In the rear we're gonna use these turnbuckle points. So hopefully it'll be super easy to just take in and out if you ever wanted to. In order to figure out where on the bottom to drill the holes, what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this as far forward as we can. We're gonna lift it over these bolts and then push it right up against this plastic here. The 41 inches fits in between these plastic points correctly, but the plastic is not perfectly square. So what we need to do is make sure that this space is about the same on both sides. So I think it's basically only favoring this side. Got kind of half a crack there. And then look over here. You can see we're still touching up here on this plastic part. Kind of just look to see if this is square along here. Okay, so I just pulled the plywood out and see how there's like a little indent right here? That is from the bolt, okay? There's the other indent from the bolt. So we're gonna drill holes in those two spots so that we can thread those bolts through. Now most of you probably know how to pick the right size drill bit, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick a drill bit that's about the same size as the threaded shaft, but maybe just slightly small so that those threads will dig into the board. Just helps with a really nice touch and fit. So let's drill those holes now. So there's multiple ways to go about actually cutting the plywood for the top of this. And basically what you could do is just take like the length and then the width of your aluminum extrusion platform section and then just cut a piece to that size. However, sometimes this will go together slightly not square, or maybe something needs to be tweaked a little bit. And so what I've done is I've tightened down all my pieces and I'm just tracing out the size of plywood I would need. So for these drawer sections, I think that's probably the way to go since they're a little more custom. But the top and the bottom of the big plywood like housing, I'm going to say measure the length and width and cut those the right size, and then we'll tighten up everything within the platform like housing so that it will be square, because there's so much more to tighten than on these. And if I did everything right and I cut these all to the same length, when you tighten everything up it should be basically square. So that's my tactic for cutting these top boards. Okay, so I just want to kind of explain how I cut a lot of this plywood to build the drawer and some of the recommendations that I can make for you. So first I'm just going to explain how I cut the wood and why I did what I did, and then we'll kind of show how this is going to fit into my platform. So I wanted the front of the drawer to be a lot larger so that there's a clean flat plate along the front of my platform when you open the trunk. But if you wanted this to just be a basic drawer inside an enclosure for your platform, you could easily cut this the same size as all the sides. You could typically use like a circular saw like this one right here to do all of these cuts, but I have a table saw, and so I've been using this, and this guide helps a ton to help cut straight lines. But you technically could just clamp a straight edge and then use that saw right there. So that's one option if you don't have all of these tools. However, I do have a miter saw and a table saw, so I cut most of this with a miter saw or table saw. So the next thing I recommend is keep the sides completely flat. Okay, so this board here, this isn't part of the drawer. This is just what I'm working on top of. But inside of here, there's a raised piece of plywood. And so what I did is I cut a piece to fit inside all of the sides of the drawer. And the reasoning for this is when I built the last drawer and I mounted my drawer slide on the side, the drawer slide landed in between the floor and the side of the drawer. So it was kind of like this. And then I mounted my drawer slide here, but it wasn't perfectly flush. And I think it maybe causes issues in getting a flat mounting surface for your drawer slide. So that's just something I'd recommend. Maybe, I don't know, try and do it like this, how I'm doing, so that basically when you put the side on your drawer, there's no way you're gonna have any issues with mounting your drawer slide. So, and what I did is I cut a slightly shorter piece in the middle because I've notched the whole exterior so I can set in a piece of plywood, just to give kind of a basic demonstration. This can sit right here, and then if you look down, it's basically flush. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a lip, but it's basically flush. So that's just a nice way to store this insert, because then when I pull out my drawer, there's going to be a nice working surface under or above the contents of the drawer. So I cut out that notch. Basically the notch is 3/4 of an inch deep, and then 3/8 of an inch in this direction because it's 3/4 inch plywood, and I wanted to have a flush piece of plywood sit on top. So, and what I chose to do was have these side pieces go all the way to the back, and then have the back piece a little bit shorter instead of having this come all the way out to the edge, just because I thought it would look a little cleaner with this notch out. I'm sure there was a way that I could have not done this notch, but with the table saw and just basically running these down with the guide, I'd set the guide right and then the height of the blade so I could cut this out. So that's how I basically cut all the wood. You can get a lot of this cut at Home Depot. I know they have a plywood saw, but then it's still going to be kind of challenging to cut everything the way you want. So what I do is I do all the long cuts with either a table saw or that circular saw. And then when I'm doing the shorter distance cuts, like for example, this is not a 48-inch long piece of wood as if I like stripped it off the end of a piece of plywood like those over there. This is, I think, 35.5 inches long. So then what I do is I bring this piece of wood over to my chop saw or miter saw, whatever you want to call it, line it up, and then I cut it to the length that I need. So longer cuts, use a table saw, and then shorter cuts, use the miter saw. And you can obviously change this up how you would like. If in your platform you wanted to have 2 smaller drawers, you could. I'm a big fan of the 1 big drawer because it creates a nice level working surface that's all connected. So that was kind of my thinking.
As you watch these videos, all of the materials that I use will be linked down below in the description, so feel free to go check that out if you're trying to build along as I build this equipment. So when it comes time that you've actually cut everything out and you're ready to start assembling, we're going to screw and glue this whole thing together. And basically anywhere that you want to have a piece of plywood connect to the side of something, you're going to want one of these pocket screws. And ideally the pocket screws are going to face away from anywhere you're going to see. So this is the bottom of the drawer, and I've put in a bunch of pocket holes to put pocket screws, and they'll be on the bottom. So when I put things in the drawer, you're never going to see this. And I want to be attaching sides to the bottom, so that's why I've got a screw hole right here. I'm going to put a bunch of glue along this, and then when I press this up against it, it will glue and the screw will pull it in tight. And so that's what we're going to do. And all the sides have been pocket holes drilled already, so now I just have to start assembling. Okay, so I've got a bunch of this glued and screwed together. If you can kind of see in this little crack here, there's a little bit of residual glue I've been wiping up. And then these pocket screws are what I use to lock this down, but for all the other sides where there's easily a place on the exterior to put pocket screws, that's where I put them. However, this middle one, it's kind of hard to avoid. If it really bothers you, you can put wood filler in there, which looks like this right here. Wood filler. I might actually do it just because I'm trying to do this platform right, but I haven't quite decided. And then if you notice, this is lower than the edge, so that's why there's this piece of wood that can basically hook right into this little lip on the edge and then perfectly flush. Pretty slick. But I tried to center it fairly well, and then I knew I wanted to put this socket set in this section right here. So basically I measured it out to be perfect fit, and so it fits in there, maximizing the space on this side. So that's kind of my thought, and I haven't put the front on yet just because I want to make sure everything's going to be right before I put it on. So for now, I think I'm just going to leave it this way, but I want to get everything as assembled as far as I can and then start putting on bed liner. So that's kind of the next steps, is just getting everything ready to be bed lined before I start attaching it to the platform aluminum extrusion exoskeleton for permanent use. So lastly, I haven't cut this front piece yet, but my plan is to have it overhang just slightly, because when I mount up my drawer slides,
to the outside of this, I want it to butt up next to the front of the drawer. So that way when you look at the front of the drawer, you're not gonna see a little drawer slide right here. It's just gonna be flush, nice and clean. So that's my thinking. Now I'm gonna grab the aluminum extrusion enclosure and just set it over the top of this, just to kind of give a proof of concept, since this is like acting as the piece of plywood that will be in the vehicle, and then the drawer will be inside the aluminum enclosure, and then there'll be a piece of plywood on top. So I'm gonna grab that now. Okay, so now I set my aluminum extrusion cage over the top of the drawer, and basically how this is laid out is the drawer pulls out from this side, and like I said, I haven't cut this, but it's gonna fit inside of this metal frame and go right to the front of that drawer. Okay, so just kind of imagine. And then there's gonna be a piece of plywood on top, and then all these little hooks on the side will be little mounting points that will face upward, just like this. So basically, see how where I put this piece of plywood? In this section here, this is where the front of the platform is going to retract into if you're disassembling the front, like middle section that goes over the middle row in the 4Runner. So that's gonna slide in right in this groove, okay? This groove here, that's where it's gonna slide in, and then it'll slide all the way back to basically where this plywood is. So everything under it is going to be drawer, and then even this little section right here is going to be like a taller drawer section right at the edge of the drawer. So I'm still trying to decide if I cut an insert for flat working surface that extends the whole length, but I think my plan is going to be I'll cut a piece that goes from here to here, and then this remaining section I will leave taller because I think it'll be nice to have that extra height. So if I cut and insert that whole entire length, then I'm gonna lose a couple inches of space like right here on top of this section of the drawer. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And then basically the top of this enclosure is going to have a piece of plywood that comes all the way out to the end here. And then I'm gonna cut out this plywood part here in like a triangle shape to accommodate the shape of these brackets, because this is where the next section of the platform is gonna actually hook in. So I wanted to give like a little example of how that front middle section of the platform is gonna fit inside of here. So this is like the 60% seat section that I haven't put in here to just show like where the drawer is gonna be under the part that pulls out. And then this is the open section like I was talking about. And then this is the 40% seat section. So you see how that's gonna push right into there when I'm storing it, and then what I'll do is I'll pull it out and it's gonna hook in right on these brackets.
So when you're trying to pick out how to coat wood and what materials you want to use, I really like plywood, and I've stuck with 3/4 inch plywood because I think it's a little more sturdy, and I think it's a little less prone to warp. You know, the thinner the plywood you do, the more likely I think it's gonna warp. And when you have something you're sleeping on up here, I just try to prevent it from warping, because then you're gonna have some sort of issues in other areas on your build. So the next consideration is you have to decide what you want to put on the wood. Do you want to stain it? Do you just want to waterproof it? What's your plan? And how are you going to basically prevent it from deteriorating over time or getting moldy depending upon where you store it, etc. So I decided to do a mixture. I did Bedliner, and then I also did stain. And when I stained, I put on a protective coating.
Okay, so I just got done adding a coat of Bedliner to 2 pieces of plywood, and it's kind of hard to see, but this is the top of my platform section, and this is a plate that goes in my trunk. And I used this kit that comes with a quart of Herculiner, which is all dirty. I'm letting that dry to throw away. Comes with this like sponge that's rough. I don't know if it's for sanding or just cleaning. And then I bought some of this xylene because it helps to thin it out a little bit. And then there's my tray with my roller and paintbrush. And so far, I don't know if I would have done this. It's decent, but I don't know if I'm gonna really like it, so we'll see when it dries. And I'm probably gonna end up just doing the rest of this in either a paint or just coating it with a lacquer, so stay tuned.
Then I bedlined the plywood that went under the platform and then also above it. I don't really know why I bedlined this lower portion. I don't really think it's completely necessary, but it does create a durable surface. And if I ever wanted to take off this aluminum extruded part, I could just leave this in the floor of the 4Runner as just a durable floor that wouldn't ruin the carpet. But I bedlined the piece of plywood that goes on top because I thought that it would be a really nice non-slip surface, because when you put the waterproof mat on top of the bedliner and then you put a little weight on it, it doesn't slide hardly at all. And so the top of this is bedlined. Now some of you might be thinking that doesn't feel very good if you're gonna lay on it. Well, when you put in the mattress, it's going to go on top of that, and it's not really going to bother you because you're probably going to be on top of your mattress. And if you don't have a full width mattress, you're gonna have something on top of it to where it's probably just gonna be handy to be durable and not slipping. So to prepare all the wood, once you cut it, I did a 50 grit sandpaper and then 180 grit sandpaper to smooth everything out. I also used a little bit of wood filler in the random cracks or cutouts inside of the plywood because some of it wasn't perfect. And that was great if you weren't staining, because the stain really brings out the wood filler. But if you're going to paint yours, the wood filler will be just fine. Similarly with the bed liner, where I put in wood filler, you can't even notice. This is the polyurethane I use, just a fast drying Minwax. I bought this, I believe, at Lowe's, but you can get it at most places. All of the stain I used is the special walnut color. I believe I bought that also in Minwax brand. I would heavily discourage you from buying a polyurethane and stain all in one. They seem to go on really poorly, so I don't use those. I used it once and I never will again. And then the Bedliner kit is linked down below, but it's basically this Herculiner stuff that comes with a little, and then you just purchase this little kit where it's got a roller and it's got this really firm roller brush, so don't use a paint roller. It's got this special roller with these plastic bristles on it that helps you roll on the Herculiner. It's really thick, so I used a quart just for this piece of plywood and then a quart just for the plywood piece up here. So if you're trying to do all of it in Bedliner because you want a blacked out durable look, then you're going to need quite a bit, probably upwards of a gallon, maybe 2, depending upon if you do your whole entire drawer with Bedliner.
So I just want to provide a little update. This is the polyurethane I've been using, this clear satin. And I put a special walnut stain on all of this. And so it's coming together. The garage is an absolute mess, but I just wanted to provide a little color update. I like how the color's turning out. And then over here, this is the bed lined portion. I think the bed liner was a cool touch, but I don't think I would do it again.
So in summary, I cut this piece of wood here. This is stained and then lacquered on both sides. I wanted this to be super durable and super waterproof because this is the insert that goes into the drawer and it's a work surface. Similarly, for these pieces of wood, I wanted them to be smooth so they slid in and out of the platform well. So they're stained and they're lacquered as well. I think the plywood just looks a lot nicer when you stain it, but depending upon how nice a plywood you buy, maybe you're just going to like the waterproof lacquered or polyurethane look. Well, I hope you enjoyed part 2 of the build series. And if it brought you any sort of value, please consider giving the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and make sure to turn on that notification bell so you're actually notified when I post a new video. So thanks for watching this far in the video series, and part 3 will be coming out soon, talking about assembling the entire thing so that it's ready to be put in the vehicle, and then showing how we actually are going to install this big beast of a platform into the vehicle. So thank you so much for watching. As always, if you have any sort of comments,
please feel free to just drop them down below. I think I do a really good job of responding to comments. And so hopefully if you need my input or you just have a question on something that I was doing, then feel free to comment down below. So until part 3 of the build series, I think you'll know where to find me. Have a good one.